Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. How we doing? How we doing? Stephanie checking in with another episode of Class Disruption, disrupting the status quo of education. And before we get into it, make sure you smash that like button. And if you haven't already, I'd be truly honored and blessed if you would subscribe. It's that red bar right there below the video, and go ahead and click that bell right next to it so you can get notified every time I drop a video. But of course, the most important thing you could do is share this video with other educators, with parents, with students, with people all around the globe, because it truly does take a village to make this disruption happen. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today with Rosa Vasquez from right here in the Bronx, and better known as Collaborative Conscious. 1 year ago, she started her company, Collaborative Conscious, because she saw an imbalance in the relationship between the government and the schools and the communities that they were supposed to be serving. And I think right now with the coronavirus, that relationship has become even more obvious. And it's all about the community. We need to be coming together to make sure our people have what they need, rather than the schools stepping in to fill that vacuum. Because if we don't take power, if we don't take that control, then the schools are just going to keep underserving us. So it's all about coming together and creating that village. So let's go ahead and get into it. Rosa, aka Collaborative Conscious. What's going on, lady? How we doing?
Hey, good evening. How's it going? It's going, right?
It's a little more than the evening. This is getting to my bedtime, but I've been dying to have this conversation with you. We've been going back and forth a little bit, but it's the only time we got without the little ones. So
yes.
All right, so why don't we just start off, we'll keep it easy. I'll save my tough questions for later, but just tell us, who you are, what you're all about, and about Collaborative Conscious and what it stands for.
Okay, well, so my name is Rosa. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I reside in Queens. I'm a mother of two little ones, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm also, as a profession, I'm a special education provider. So I provide special education services for students across the city, both private and public schools. I have experience with various community organizations and in different social sectors, so from foster care to community or after-school programs, also youth and family community organizations, and even in the family court and juvenile justice system. And that all came from being an alumni at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, and then I got my graduate degree at Fordham University. So that's just my professional and educational background.
We gotta watch out for you, or not us, actually. The system gotta watch out for you, because you know this system inside and out. And
oh my God, yes.
The knowledge it takes to tear it down. But keep going. You were gonna go on.
Yeah. So just going into all those is the reason why I created Collaborative Conscious. Conscious of just having that experience. Working in the schools and the families and the communities. It just led to that mission and vision.
And that's what we need. I think, now more than ever, we need to have that consciousness, that awakeness. We need to be able to draw that line between that government power that says, okay, we're going to close the schools. And okay, where's that line stop? Where's that line between what the government should do in these extra times and just in normal times, and where does our responsibility come in, and where does our role come in? So that's definitely where I want to take the conversation tonight. So, the coronavirus affecting us, people coming down with the disease, and the Bronx, from what I understand, is of New York City, which is the hardest hit place in the country. The Bronx is the hardest hit place in New York City. So why don't you just tell us what it's like on the ground there?
In New York City, right?
Yeah, New York City, and specifically the Bronx.
Well, I know for me, I go back and forth frequently to the Bronx and living in Queens, and just seeing that everything has shifted a lot. It started as people are sort of in that in-between period of being up in the air of hearing the misinformation or just hearing the information that is given to them. So it's very difficult to really try to like see like which are the facts and which is the information that's being spread out of fear. And I think walking around there, you could see that each day it just feels a little bit emptier. Just just seeing it, but also just the fear. You could like it feels like as soon as you walk outside, there's this tension and this fear amongst everybody. And I think that just comes from the unknown of like what to expect. Like we're not getting a lot of questions, or a lot of answers to our questions, and it's I could see the effect it's having on people, and it's like just really looking out for yourself and wondering like what can you do during this whole process.
Yeah, I mean, I went to the grocery store today, and there was a line outside because they're only letting so many people in the store at a time. And it's like, on the one hand, it's like, okay, these things are good. These are good measures. But on the other hand, they also go to increase your fear and your anxiety. And so what do you think, what do you see as that dynamic between the community and the city at this time? And we'll keep it in the context of education. So I know when a lot of this first started happening and we were calling for the schools to be closed, and the city was like, no, schools are essential. We're going to keep them open as long as possible, as long as we can. And I know from students, from teachers, from families, there was a huge outcry, but the city was saying, oh, they need to feed kids. They need to provide these services. Kids don't have laptops. So what do you see as that line? And what role should the schools be playing? Like, should that be a reason why to keep them open?
I think with the whole thing going on in the news, and actually, us as educators, we know from the front lines, the back and forth that happens between city and state legislatures and everything. So now it's being, as us seeing it and the public seeing it, we're going to notice now, like, okay, there's a lot of back and forth going on. It's going to reveal that the school system, the city and the state was not prepared for any of this. They weren't prepared for making students, teachers, and schools to be just, like they say, 21st century learners, to be what should have been technological learners. Like we should have had like this information already, something that was pushed when we were going into the 21st century. But I think they just dropped the ball on that one completely, or it just got pushed to the side for other things according to the social climate that happens every 4 or 8 years. And I think educators are not properly educated on technological protocols. Like I know for me going to school, like I learned some things, but it wasn't like the main focus. I feel like I learned more like how to manage behavior in the classroom over like
you don't want any class disruptions, right?
I know, like, and I'm like, oh my God, is that really like what the issue is? Like it's so much more to it, which I could go into another topic. But just going back to the, just all the, just not properly trained with all the technology and just the lack of professional developments that will help teachers to understand like how to bring technology not only outside the classroom, but, inside the classroom as well. We just did not have that. And I think a lot of that is going to be seen through the socioeconomic status, is going to become more noticeable.
That I had, kids told me today who needed technology. They did receive some iPads. One of them emailed me though saying that she was trying to log in and it was asking her for some code, and that there are still limitations with like the apps they can have on them. But yeah, definitely getting the technology out. But I just think in terms of like the teacher PD, we do PD every week. We have that mandatory PD. But at the same time, I just feel like within the context that it's set up, it just becomes this like rat race of like, oh, I'm just spinning the wheel, doing what I'm supposed to do. But there's no real like authentic learning spaces where teachers can actually like take ownership and say, okay, this is what we did in PD and apply it. Now, I do think at my school, it happens here and there and perhaps more than other schools, but just like on this real broad basis, especially like you said, moving people to be these 21st century like learners and teachers, it doesn't happen in a real way. And this context, now that we don't have any of the traditional elements, totally, like you said, just like blows the lid off and just shows how irrelevant that system is.
No, it's so true. And I think it's just going to lead into just everyone noticing like which schools had the ability to afford this modern tech and who didn't. So that, like I said, the socioeconomic status, and like you notice some schools like they had the name tech in them, or they had that mission and vision tech, but they didn't have a modern tech lab or nothing like up to date with laptops. And it was like, how do you put the name in there? How do you, because that was one of the things, like parents would come in and, you know, they ask, is this school like technological or what they say it is? And it's hard to prove when you don't have, you know, the
Yeah.
stuff to show it. And so it's just going to leave the question to the wonder, like, how are educators ever expected to meet the needs, especially me as a special education provider and a teacher? How are we expected to meet the needs of students with disabilities, those with IEPs, even ELLs, you know, to meet those mandates that some of them, some special education students need to use technology? Like, do teachers get properly trained for that, which is something that we rarely don't, if ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and two, you're bringing in like socioeconomic, like that socioeconomic and that race element then to add a whole nother layer. And that's my question too, is like, okay, where's the kind of like, I do feel like they've been using coded language to be like, oh, these poor people or these, you know, black and brown people, they can't do for themselves, so we have to do for them. And I do think to an extent, yeah, the government should be there to like help create more equity and equality or equal opportunity for people. But like you said, they use these like terms like, oh, technology
The
high school,
buzzwords.
or like equity for all. And it's like, yeah, they're nice words, but like, what does that really mean in real terms? And at what point are we actually providing equity, or are we creating this like overbearing state where you just feel like you need the government?
Yeah, they like some mission and vision statements. They know how to use those buzzwords to get those grants. You know, so that's all it is really. And you know, it's one of those things. Is like
The
we
money, the
should,
grants. I
oh,
didn't think about that. That's a good point.
you know, like now I think it's using certain buzzwords to get, you know, social wellness, you know, grants and everything. And it's sad
Mhm.
that we have to know what words to use to get the money that's available in the time frame. But overall, like one of the things since early 2000s should like was the mission of the schools was to build every student, every individual to be a modern day citizen, a 21st century citizen, even going into it. But all that has changed just with the social climate in the school system. You know, like it probably was relevant back then and it was something that was where the money was going, but now the school system climate has changed and things have shifted. But like I said, we weren't really prepared or equipped to meet these needs of any of the mission statements, especially the one to make students 21st century citizens, which it should be that we have to make our students global citizens. That's what the overall target should have been. And if we were able to meet the needs of families and students, we were able to, you know, let's meet. I always felt like we should meet the school, the families, and the communities where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always difficult because schools are always caught like in this barrier. Which is one of my, you know, reasons for building collaborative conscious to
Mm-hmm.
break those invisible barriers between school families and communities. And schools just needed to find a way to like meet families and students where they are, what their socioeconomic status is, and just learn from that, use that to educate themselves about their environment, educate themselves about what students could bring to the table, what families could bring to the table. I think we, like you said, we sometimes feel like they can't help, they can't help themselves, you know, they're poor or this. And that leaves a label, you know, we talk about not labeling our students, but you're labeling the communities and their families by doing that. And it's not really teaching them how to be appropriate, you know, civic, you know, civilians or just community engagement, you know, individuals.
Right. It just seems like it's another way for the state or the city to kind of maintain and even increase their own power.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, again, the way that I feel like, again, I do think that we should provide the social services needed. People should be able to get meals. They should be able to get technology. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that should be an excuse to, you know, keep schools open. Like, ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
like, schools are supposed to be providing an education, and if the excuse is that they need to be providing meals and these other things, then we need to kind of rethink how we're doing the whole thing in the first place, right?
Yeah, I agree. Schools have become sort of like the overpaid babysitter in a way. Like it's supposed to be a place to be educated, to be that next generation's, person in technology or person in the world and as a citizen. But schools have become sort of like this space that this is the way things are done. This is how it's structured, and that's it. There's no room for autonomy, and there's no room for like
Mm,
accountability anywhere. So it's like,
right.
where do we find that thin, there's that thin line. Where do we say, okay, where do we give accountability to who, and when do we give it to the students and to the families, and what kind of autonomy are we giving the teachers, especially? Like,
Yeah.
where's that element to it?
Yeah, and I mean that's the same way I kind of feel about the whole spring break thing. I mean, I've been working my butt off, and I'm not one to count days. I'm not one to like, check off the boxes, but I was kind of like telling myself with this whole transition, and I have my son, and he's 4, and
Mm-hmm.
how it's like to have a 3, 4, 5 year old. Like they need a lot of attention. So after like
Mm-hmm.
20, 30 minutes of them doing their little thing, it's like, mommy, this and that. And it's like, I'm on a Zoom call, or I'm trying to like finish my assignment, or it's like taking forever to upload. And it just really takes like a real emotional toll on me to then be like, no, like I need to do this. And then I yell at him, and then I feel bad for yelling at him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
and then too, the excuse is that, oh, we need to keep these families busy over spring break so they don't go outside. And I'm like, do they really need us like that though? Like, or like, are they able to kind of like look out for themselves, and like they're either gonna do it or they're not gonna do it, right? That's
Yeah, I think that if the DOE didn't know, like even the U of T is handing out resources to their parents to give, ways to homeschool. They don't like to, notice they're not using the word
oh
homeschool.
no.
They're not going to say that. But, they're giving resources on how you could distant learn or remote learn your child. But there's so many ways that parents, give autonomy, give the power to parents to let them know, like, it's going to be different from the school system. It doesn't have to be structured like that, but I think it's more of reassuring. Like right now, my daughter's in pre-K, and I'm seeing the workload. I'm like, she's just in pre-K. What is all this work that she's getting? Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, and
Yeah.
some of the stuff, it's more like, it should be at that age, should be a lot of hands-on engagement, learning, from things going around the house, like from
Mhm.
outdoor activities, things like that. And sometimes it gets to a point that I'd be like, okay, I close the laptop and I'm like, okay, we're going to cook together, we'll talk, we'll clean together, we're going to learn those kind of elements. But they don't
Exactly.
mention that in the curriculum, it's not even considered something. And then you have years later, they're complaining that the students are not, you know,
Prepared for the real world, right?
yeah.
Which kind of like brings us to our next point that we wanted to cover is like, how should we be preparing kids for college or for the real world or to survive? Like, what should the goal be of education? Because, right now, like you said, there was that shift from like the 21st century person to equity, and like everybody needs to go to college. But really,
Hmm.
what do you see as the purpose of education?
I think it's all about preparing them for the real world, but and just being a global citizen, knowing that there's going to be shifts, and preparing them to understand how to have that power, how to gain that experience. Because sometimes, in my opinion, put in an experience element. Like we do say college, but some students already know that they don't want to go to college as a pathway for them toward a career. Some of them go into technical schools and want to go into a different type of entrepreneur route. But we don't have a lot of those, those programs that are geared
Mm,
toward that to get them. They talk about, especially our system is all about capitalism and, the dollar is God, the money is God. But it's like we don't teach them the accurate way of how to reach that. Are we teaching those skills of real estate and financial literacy?
right.
It's the bare bones really now of financial literacy. But
We teach a lot of consumerism, like
yes.
the consumerism side of it, but not like the side like, oh, if there is a pandemic or there is some type of like scenario where we can't necessarily rely on the government, where you have to really rely on yourself, like, do you have money saved up? You
Yeah,
know?
I think for me, experience is it outweighs education. I took the educational route, so I went to school, and my family grew up poor, and we were always told you got to go to school to be successful and to get this in life, it was one of those things that then I started getting experience in, in jobs and in careers, and it made me feel like I learned so much more from the experience than the education. But also, I'm not knocking education as well. I feel like you do need a strong education base, because that also brings value to a child, and letting them know that they decide to go to college or to pursue a different type of path in education. It lets them, to learn something that they'll, brings them a sense of self, and it brings them a sense of community. So education has its tons of benefits as well.
Or it's like, if you're doing this thing, right? And it's like, okay, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to build this. I don't know how to go about, buying a house or entering real estate. Then you can go back to that educational foundation. And that's what I really do appreciate, like, from my son. I'm doing a lot of those hands-on kind of things. Like, we're going to the park, and like we live on Long Island Sound. So it has like these signs as you go around that are like, this is the habitat and these are the type of birds. And then he's always like, oh, can we watch a video about that on YouTube? Because he's like a big YouTube head. So I'm like, yeah, we can totally watch something about that on YouTube. And that's what I think that relationship really needs to be between the doing. I'm doing this thing. I need to learn more about this thing. But we don't at all allow for that initial spark to happen. We're just like, this is what you're going to learn. Now learn it, because it's going to be relevant someday. I promise.
Yeah. And just, that's so true. I do it with my kids too. I like to give them those hands-on experiences, and, do those technical experiences, and also look, there's so many different learners. As we are told as educators, we have to do universal design and multitude, modalities of learning. So we should be able to do that in experience as well, and also in the job field, not just one type of field. And going back to your question about without a government, could we survive? I feel like it would be very difficult for people to survive. Like, it's been something ingrained in our generations, for as long as like my family was here, and just like that dependency on the government to always help us, to always have that right answer for us. Like, don't worry, things are going to be okay. But lately things have shifted, and, it led me to wonder for a while, but even more now, seeing like how the government is handling COVID, and how the city and state separately, from the state government is handling it. Like, how do we educate our students to be self-sufficient, to serve their communities, and to bring back, for me, my mission is to bring back the modern day version of it takes a village.
Right. Yeah. And we should be able to do that without the government telling us, right? We shouldn't need the government to shut down the parks or to shut down the city or to do these things. We should have the social responsibility to hold each other accountable to those standards. And that's really where my line is too. And even me, I'm like questioning myself, like, I have some savings saved up. I just bought a condo, so I have much less of a cushion than I would normally have. But I'm like, dang, did I, invest in the right things by just having savings? Should I have bought more of this or more of that? And, should I have educated myself more on the laws? So I know after this, I'm definitely going to reevaluate how I'm saving my money and how I'm using my time to understand that relationship as well.
Yeah, what they call it, like some people call it YouTube Academy. Like, I'm learning through YouTube Academy, and it's like, what? Like, there's so much resources out there, but we don't even tell students that. Like, for example, when students go to college, they don't realize that they could take these exams to like get credits for some of the courses. So they could actually just take exams and skip the first year of, freshman year in college if they just take those exams and pass it and just study them. The CLEP exam, CLEP, that's something like I had to learn from research, my own research.
Yeah.
Not that the college counselor told me ever about it.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, and some people just don't know themselves, or some things are so complicated that it's just like, I'll just do it the way it is. But that's the one thing that I've learned too, is like, if I'm gonna do anything, especially if you're investing so much money into it, like college, you better research the hell out of it. Everything, get many different sources. And in some ways, I feel like there's been a little shift. Like, information is so easy. The clicks are so easy. And a lot of my students don't even realize those first things are ads that pop up on those search engines. had to do a lot with that. So I definitely think there needs to be way more education just on internet, using the internet, finding sources, and just letting kids explore without having this like objective that needs to be met within that 45 or 55-minute time frame, because that's just not the way. I don't know, it just doesn't make sense in this fluid, ever-changing world.
Yeah, it's difficult because you also have to, children still go to their parents, to be able to use the internet, and the parents are not in the know of like how to engage the internet themselves, or they can't afford it. And also the big one is you keep hearing the news about internet scams and internet predators, and it's like there's a flip side to every good. There's evil, good, there's bad, and it's like we can't always focus on the negative of it. How can we use a very valuable 21st century skill of using the internet to our advantage, professionally?
That's just why we just need more like pure and authentic community players like Collaborative Conscious, you, rather than having, the government and its paternalistic, maybe perhaps well-intentioned, but I would argue whenever you concentrate power to that extent, those intentions, however good they may be, can just never have that same ring that when it like comes grassroots from the community. So that's definitely my hope for after this. Like, I know everybody talks about, oh, we're not going to go back to normal, but I don't know. I don't necessarily think there's going to be any huge great shift, but I do hope at least there'll be a few people from the community and we start really investing more in our communities ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And since I've been, this whole thing started, even before this, with Collaborative Conscious, I do what's called School Family Community Resource Hubs, which I take to school. It's really local and grassroots independent entrepreneurs and organizations that want to reach out to the community or the schools and families. So finding a way to bring them three together to different school districts. And one thing I see is, that power that people want to come together. They want to help each other. It's just sometimes not knowing where to look, knowing where to find it. And with this, when all this happened recently, resources have been coming in like crazy. And, when I first started the whole resource hub and the idea of Collaborative Conscious, I thought, are people really gonna, vibe with this? Is this something people, sometimes you question yourself, but then, you know what, I'm gonna keep sticking to it. I believe it. I trust the process. And now it's something that's needed more than ever. And I want to, thank people who've been following, who've been sharing the resources, say, hey, I know this is a resource that artists need, or a resource that moms need, or teachers need, and been sharing it with me, and I've been sharing it with others. And we just have to keep that circle going, coming full circle, and knowing that we could build something, like you said, build something amongst ourselves instead of waiting for
the government to be like, oh, we figured out how to like transition schools into places to hand out food. Like, no, we already have this whole program set up within ourselves, and we could take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Like and that's also
and medically too. Like we have it, there's been already, hey, home remedies, natural remedies from abuela and abuelo. Like, get them. Those things, it worked for them back then. It's working now. But we don't hear that in the news about vitamin C
eating
or
healthy.
taking, the eating healthy piece.
And that's my other thing too, is like, I've seen some of those like food banks and stuff, and like, I think, okay, people do need food, yes, but like the food that is at those things is not like healthy food. Like I saw like cereals, and it's like those sugary cereals, or like I saw fruit roll-ups, or like those, like all that stuff is just processed, wheat-based, like sugary stuff. And of course people need to eat, but it's like, is that what we're really feeding them? More garbage that's just going to make them go be more unhealthy?
Right. It's sad to see that, we're like, those that sadly, some people need to depend on the government. It's not wrong with that, if it's something that you need at that moment, but they just know that they're going to give you whatever they feel is
that government cheese.
And it's funny to see, because I was giving out resources, and one of the resources I found was about the WIC program, WIC, and it's basically food, and they give to, these coupons they give to families and mothers to feed their children. So it was funny to find out that they now allowed organic foods. I'm like, wait, organic foods weren't available before? So now organic foods are available?
Exactly. And that's what I think, that they just need to give. I think that's how it should be. We shouldn't be giving people things. We should be giving people the ability to make the choices that are best for
Hmm.
them. And people are going to make bad choices, but I think for the most part, people will make the choices that are right for them and that are good for them. And like you said, it comes from experience. Maybe they make the wrong choices at first. I mean, I make plenty of bad choices all the time, and then it's
So
just
you learn from, that's how we learn.
learn. And when we don't let people like make those choices,
Yes.
make mistakes and learn, and we're just constantly saying, oh, we're here for you, oh, we're here for you, oh, just come back to us, come, we can't grow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just super excited to be able to be part of your network and see this thing grow, and definitely be part of that. So but you were talking before about like where people could find you at, like where can people find you, find the resource hub and all that?
Right now I'm on Instagram, or you can send me an email, collaborativeconscious.com, but you can find me on Instagram under Collaborative Conscious. My mission and vision, of course, is to bring back the modern day version of It Takes a Village, from those in the digital world to the on-the-go lifestyles. It's a way of bringing communities together, starting those collaborations and making connections and creating those ideas that reshape communities, for sure.
Yes, and we are, like we are being forced now to reshape. And so hopefully those seeds are being planted, and when
With the
people are,
public school system, I hope it is. This is
Mhm.
definitely going to be a shift that, I'm not surprised. Like, inside, like, you feel like, am I the only crazy one knowing that this school system needs to change? And now you're seeing it. And like we were talking about before, don't be surprised if, like, all these private companies that do the private tutoring online, and those companies that, because already in other countries, like China was doing distant learning. They were using some teachers from America teaching
Yeah,
over there. Don't be surprised if those companies are going to be paid to teach the whole system how to convert into
yeah,
internet learning.
exactly. And two parents getting to kind of see that more front hand view from their house, like what their kids are doing, how they're learning, them, maybe this isn't so hard, maybe we can find other ways to school our kids without relying on these government schools that
Mm.
we never really liked in the first place, but felt like it was our only option. So
Yes, for sure. I think it's also going, with the school system, it's one of those things that teachers are going to now have to do a lot more for requirements. It's going to have a lot more that they have to put on their resume. And of course, making sure that students have access to technology and their homes and also in nearby communities, and hopefully the government or any way that communities and families could get these resources, it'll bridge that gap, and make those connections with the local community businesses as well, because they have so much to offer. So being able to assist with that as well.
yeah, so I hope we just bring all this stuff. It's been super awesome having this conversation with you. And anything you want to leave the people with?
I just want to say thank everybody who's joined me on Class Disruption with Stephanie, and also just like actually Sunday will be a year since I created Collaborative Conscious. So I hope you could
Ooh.
come through and just, give me a shout out and just give me some love right now. And also, like, if right now we're all on the same boat, so just take things one step at a time and just be, pause if you need to. Also, there's nothing wrong if you have to pause just for that presence.
Yeah, you to
Know
be
you're doing your
conscious, you
best.
need to breathe, like your shirt says. You got to
Oh
breathe.
yeah, this is the yoga and wellness program I did. Breathe for Change. They're awesome. Yeah.
Lots of deep breaths right now to maintain that focus. So I'm right there with you. And
Hmm.
yeah, thank you so much.
Yes,
And
thank you.
congratulations on 1 year. That's awesome.
Yes, thank you.
Oh man, I can't believe that we're so close and we've never met. The first thing I'm gonna do when this whole thing is over and we can all get back out in the streets is I'm linking up with Rosa. Cause it's one thing to get out here and to be chatting over video and to be linking up on social media and supporting each other. But once we get that in-person vibes going, we are going to be unstoppable. And I know right now, all communities around the country are feeling the same way. It truly takes a village, and we have to step up and we have to be willing to fill in those gaps, to lead our people, and to really show them that when we come together, We are unstoppable, and we don't need this guise of equity to come in and really just take our autonomy away, right? We need to get back to that notion of being a 21st century citizen. And again, that's not the government telling us what that is. That's us telling the government what it is, because the government is a reflection of us and not the other way around. So make sure you're out there, you're building up your village, you're supporting your people. And if you haven't already, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, share this video, support the channel, spread the message, and stay foolish, y'all.